Question 1. The Space Shuttle Challenger disaster took place on January 28, 1986, and involved the U.S. Space Shuttle Challenger exploding shortly after it launched. The night before the shuttle was set to launch from Cape Canaveral, Florida, there was a large cold wave that left a thick layer of ice over the launch pad. This severe cold and ice had caused two of the rubber O-rings that sealed the joint between the two lower segments of the right rocket booster to shrink and lose resiliency. This caused hot exhaust gas to escape from the booster, and as the shuttle increased altitude, the leak got worse. After 59 seconds, an 8-foot flame came out of the hole. This flame grew to 40 feet. This melted a strut that was holding the three boosters to a tank filled with liquid oxygen and hydrogen, and when the strut broke, the booster base pierced through the tank, causing it to collapse and explode. This caused the shuttle to instantly explode. There were 7 crew members on board the Challenger at the time of the explosion, who were Christy McAuliffe, Francis Scobie, Michael Smith, Allison Onzuka, Judith Resnick, Ronald McNair, and Gregory Jarvis. It is believed that the crew survived the initial explosion but died due to oxygen deficiency minutes before impact. Question 2. The stakeholders of this disaster are NASA, the crew, and Morton Theckel. I believe NASA's motivation was to further space exploration. The crew's motivation was to travel to space and study Halley's Comet. Morton Theckel's motivation was to build and sell NASA shuttle boosters, engines, and tanks. Question 3. The biggest ethical issue involved in this disaster was the fact that Morton Theckel was made aware of their O-rings being unreliable by numerous engineers who worked there. They did nothing with the warnings and concerns and okayed the shuttle to launch. If they had listened to their own engineers and done more testing or created new seals, maybe the shuttle would not have exploded. However, since this would have pushed back the Challenger's launch date, they decided to use the seals and let the rocket launch as scheduled. Question 4. The ethical issues involved in the management and response of engineers to management that led to this disaster were lack of communication among engineers and shuttle managers and poor safety control. The lack of communication between engineers and shuttle managers was caused by shuttle managers not listening to the engineers when they raised concerns about the design or parts being used. There was also an incident where engineers did not sign off on the launch due to their concerns and due to the fact they wanted to keep the launch as scheduled. Some shuttle managers were not even made aware of these concerns. Also, poor safety control allowed flawed designs to be used due to lack of testing and safety checks. Question 5. The environmental impacts of the Space Shuttle Challenger disaster, where there was a ton of debris created by the explosion that fell into the surrounding sea and habitats. NASA made a big effort to clean up as much debris as they could so they could study it. But with an explosion of this size over the sea, they could not clean up everything, so some of the debris were left, and things like this are harmful to fish and other wildlife to live in the surrounding area.
Question 6. What are some ethical and professional shortcomings? The main root of the causes begin with the NASA initial proposal to Congress. They have proposed more frequent and economical flights, up to 25 flights per year. But many delays happened, however. To show Congress that progress was being made, NASA scheduled a record number of flights for 1986. However, in January, further delays pushed back the flight 7 times. This created further pressure on NASA to take shortcuts, along with managerial shortcomings. Another oversight was the launch conditions on the day was not ideal. The economic impact was that millions of taxpayers' money was wasted, as well as many Americans begin to question the amount of funding that NASA received. Question 7. What is the global impact of the disaster? One impact that this disaster had was that all future civilians in space were shelved for the next 22 years. Another global impact was further satellite launches were changed from shuttle to reusable rockets, and further shuttles parts remain at the bottom of the ocean and are found to this day. Question 8. What are societal impacts? The societal impacts of the disaster were numerous. The first was that 7 people tragically lost their lives due to the disaster, one of which was a teacher. She was not a professional astronaut. She was going to try and create a better attitude towards teaching in this country. She was supposed to teach 2 lessons while in space, and after she was going to go around the country and speaking about the experience. Sadly, however, she was never able to do that. The mission was supposed to be a big win for the school systems as they were under scrutiny because of a paper called A Nation at Risk. It talked about some of the shortcomings of this country's school system. The shuttle launch was supposed to create a better morale towards teaching, but it ended up doing the opposite. Question 9. What fundamental canons, rules of practice, or professional obligations specified by the NSPE Code of Ethics would have been relevant in dictating the behavior of the engineers? In terms of fundamental canons, the first one is hold paramount the safety, health, and welfare of the public. The sixth one is conduct themselves honorably and responsibly and ethically to enhance the honor and reputation of this profession. These are all in clear violation of the terms around the space shuttle disaster. There were shortcuts taken, as well as launching in less than favorable conditions led to the failure. This was not honorable or in the best interest of the public, as well as under professional obligations. It states that professional engineers should advise their clients or employers, and many engineers saw the shortcuts and the rushed checks, yet their critiques went unheard by the managerial staff and thus caused a disaster. As a manager for such a big project, it is also a responsibility for them to make sure that the people are doing the right checks and not taking shortcuts to ensure that things like this do not happen. These sections are relevant to this case because they were not followed properly and because the rocket was not safe to launch that day. Question 10. Based on the NSPE canons and environmental, economic, global, and societal issues at stake, what were the professional responsibilities of the engineers involved in the space shuttle disaster? Based on everything at stake, there should have been a non-biased board of engineers that have expertise on rockets, but not affiliated with NASA to oversee these projects. Because the people managing the project had something at stake to get it finished on time, it led to rushed decision making and thus led to disaster. This would ensure that people making the important decisions would not have been influenced by making harmful decisions. Further, it will further ensure that Americans tax money does not go to waste, as well as preventing environmental impacts that accompany an explosion of this kind. However, the pressure can't be understated that these engineers were under. They were way behind schedule and promised Congress a record number of flights that was not reasonably attainable due to the problems with the weather and other factors.